More than 120 years ago, 3 men suddenly disappeared without a trace from a lighthouse situated on a tiny speck of an island, never to be seen again. Was it murder? Did foreign spies land on the island and take them away? Or was it something supernatural, such as a sea monster or a ghost ship? Join us as we delve deep into one of Scotland's most intriguing mysteries, the missing keepers of the Flannan Isles Lighthouse. We'll look at the events leading up to their disappearance, the investigation, the various theories explaining the crew's enigmatic disappearance, and discuss the clues that tell us what most likely happened. The Flannan Isles Lighthouse was built in 1899 on the remote Scottish island of Ellenmore in the Outer Hebrides, around 80 miles from the mainland. It is one of the 7 Flannan Isles, a group of rocky uninhabited islands that were also known as the 7 Hunters. Ellenmore was one of the largest of these islands. It features a rocky cliff and a grassy hilltop. It was on top of this hill that the lighthouse was built. On December 7th, 1900, exactly a year after the Flannan Isles Lighthouse was first lit, 3 men arrived at Ellenmore to start their 2-week shift as the keepers of the lighthouse. The 3 men were Principal James Duckett, 43, Second Assistant Thomas Marshall, 40, and occasional keeper Donald MacArthur, 28, who replaced First Assistant William Ross, a regular staff member because he was sick at the time. The men were accompanied by Superintendent of Lighthouses Robert Muirhead, who conducted a routine check of the lighthouse. After making sure everything was in working order, Muirhead left the island. The Flannan Isles Lighthouse was monitored regularly from the mainland using a telescope. This would allow the men to signal for help in case of an emergency. There was one problem though: the heavy mist that usually surrounded the island. The staff from the mainland was only able to see the lighthouse on December 7th and 12th. They had no idea that something would happen just days after the last sighting. Passing ships noted that the lighthouse was operating as usual on the night of December 14th. On the night of December 15th, the Arcta, a transatlantic steamer, passed by the Ellenmore Lighthouse on its way to the port of Leith. This time, the lighthouse was dark. They reported it to the Northern Lighthouse Board upon docking 3 days later. Due to bad weather, the Northern Lighthouse Board was unable to send a crew to investigate the incident on the 20th. The lighthouse relief vessel Hesperus only reached the island at noon on the 26th of December. Upon arrival, the crew saw no light emitting from the lighthouse. More importantly, none of the usual preparations for landing was present. There was no flag flying on the flagstaff, which was supposed to indicate that the keepers had noticed their arrival and were ready to send a rowboat out to meet them and retrieve the relief team. The provision boxes that were usually left for restocking on the landing stage were missing. Moreover, none of the keepers was present on the landing to greet their arrival. The captain of the Hesperus, Jim Harvey, attempted to get a response from the lighthouse keepers by blowing the ship's horn several times. He also fired a flare. After several attempts with no reply, Harvey commanded the relief lighthouse keeper, Joseph Moore, to get on a boat and check on the men. Moore saw that the gate to the compound and the main door of the lighthouse was closed. The beds were unmade. The winding clock had stopped. The fireplace looked like it hadn't been lit for several days. Upon seeing this grim scene, Moore knew something serious had happened. He quickly returned to the landing to report to the captain. Harvey sent his second mate and another seaman to accompany Moore in searching the rest of the island. The 3 men found no sign of the keepers anywhere. They noted that the lamps had been cleaned and refilled. The kitchen was clean. 1 set of oilskins, a waterproof coat, was still on its hook, suggesting that one of the men had set out without it. Marshall's and Duckett's seaboats were both missing. They then went to the east landing and found everything was normal. There was nothing to indicate that the men had been taken from there. The ropes were in their proper place, just as they should be after the crew arrived on the 7th. On the west landing, however, Moore and the others saw that there was considerable damage. A supply box that had been secured 70 feet up the railway, 110 feet above sea level, had been smashed open with its contents strewn about on the crevices of the rock. Turf on top of the cliff, 200 feet above sea level, had been ripped away from the cliff's edge. The men also saw the iron railings around the crane platform and up the railway were twisted out of shape. Part of a railway track was wrenched from its concrete moorings. A rock located higher up and weighed more than a ton had been dislodged and was now at a much lower position. It seemed that a massive storm had hit the island. After the men reported their findings, Harvey left Moore and 3 volunteer seamen, Lamont Campbell and boy master Alan MacDonald, on the island to operate the lighthouse. They also took the opportunity to conduct a more thorough search of the lighthouse and the island. The Hesperus set off for Brestgleet in Lewis, where Captain Harvey sent a telegram to the mainland, which was forwarded to the Northern Lighthouse Board in Edinburgh. The telegram read, "A dreadful accident has happened at Flannan's. The 3 keepers, Duckett, Marshall and the Occasional, have disappeared from the island. On our arrival there this afternoon, no sign of life was to be seen on the island. Fired a rocket, but as no response was made, managed to land Moore, who went up to the station, but found no keepers there. The clocks were stopped and other signs indicated that the accident must have happened about a week ago. Poor fellows, they must have been blown over the cliffs or drowned trying to secure a crane or something like that." On December 29th, Robert Moorhead arrived on the island. He started investigating the disappearance of the 3 men. He knew them well. He was, after all, the person who recruited them. He examined the oilskin that had been left behind and concluded that it was William MacArthur's. Why would he leave the lighthouse in bad weather without his coat? More importantly, why would the crew leave the lighthouse unmanned when the rules specifically forbid it? Something must have happened that caused them to leave the building. Something important enough that MacArthur rushed out without wearing his oilskin. Muirhead noted that the lens and machinery in the lighthouse were cleaned, which indicated that the men had finished the work for the day before they disappeared. The kitchen was tidy with the pots and pans cleaned, proving that whoever cooked had already completed his work and cleaned the space. Muirhead also inspected the western landing. He didn't see anything different from what Moore reported. Based on his investigation, Muirhead deduced that Marshall and Duckett must have gone out during the storm and tried to secure the box where the mooring ropes, landing ropes, and other equipment were kept. MacArthur most likely went out to look for them when they failed to return. All 3 were then swept away into the ocean when a large swell of water rushed towards the landing, going above the men and then coming down with a strong force. Muirhead submitted his official report on January 8, 1901. In it, he stated that the men were on duty until dinner time on Saturday, December 15th. The logbook's last entry was dated December 13th. However, there were notes up to the 15th written on the slate which reported the time the light was extinguished, as well as barometer and temperature readings taken at 9 a.m. that day. Muirhead's hypothesis sounded very logical, and the current evidence supported it. However, the public didn't agree. The bodies of the 3 men were never found, so there were plenty of wild speculations. Moreover, Ellen Moore was an island that was steeped in superstition and mystery, even before the lighthouse keepers vanished. Though Ellen Moore had been uninhabited for centuries, it does have a ruined 7th century chapel dedicated to St. Flannan. In the Middle Ages, the islands were called the Seven Hayley or Holy Isles. According to the book, A Description of the Western Islands of Scotland, which was published in 1703, regular pilgrimages were made to Ellen Moore, and some of the unusual customs practiced on the island included removing your hat and making a clockwise turn, upon reaching the plateau. Visitors to the island felt that it had an indefinable aura, making them feel a fearful reverence and moving them to perform the rituals while there. Herders who stopped by the island called it the other country. So it wasn't surprising that people started to believe something supernatural had caused the men to disappear. One theory proposed that the men had been taken away by a giant seabird or eaten by a giant sea serpent. Another theory claimed that the men were spirited away by a ghost ship, the Phantom of the Seven Hunters. Aside from the supernatural, theories about murder, suicide, foreign spies, and even aliens were also in the mix. Years after the disappearance of the 3 lighthouse keepers, speculations ran rampant again when a logbook supposedly containing entries written by Marshall surfaced. In it were strange entries written between the 12th and 15th of December. One entry on the 12th stated that they were experiencing severe winds, the likes of which I have never seen before in 20 years. He also reportedly mentioned that Duckett had been very quiet, while MacArthur cried. The entry on the 13th stated that the storm was still raging and all of them were now praying. The final log entry was dated December 15th. It read, "Storm ended, sea calm. God is over all." It was discovered much later that this logbook was fake. The logbook was mainly used by the keepers to note down the weather conditions on Ellen Moor and the status of the lighthouse. It wasn't used as a diary where one man can note down the unusual behaviors of his colleagues. Some believe that the men ran away, leaving by boat to escape from debts and start a new life. While this theory sounds plausible, there was no indication that the men were steeped in debt. Duckett, for example, had a wife and 4 children and portrayed as a family man. MacArthur was also married with 2 children. It seemed unlikely that these usually reliable men would suddenly up and leave, causing their loved ones to worry and grieve. Moreover, MacArthur was a local tailor who only served as an occasional lightkeeper when the crew was short-handed. This time around, one member of the crew was out sick, while the other, Joseph Moore, was on shore leave. If the men had left to start a new life somewhere, it couldn't have been planned since he was a last-minute addition. Moreover, there's no reason why they would prepare a meal, leave the oilskin and refill the lamps if they were leaving for a better life that day. Another theory claimed that MacArthur was a man with a violent temper, one who had settled disagreements with his fists. It was suggested that he might have argued with the 2 men while on the West Landing. A fight ensued and caused all 3 to fall to their deaths from the cliffs. A different version of the theory claims that MacArthur murdered the other 2, tossed their bodies into the sea, before throwing himself off the cliff. Though intriguing, there isn't any evidence to prove that a fight or murder took place. So, what did happen on the night of December 15th? We can only rely on the evidence that Moore and Muirhead found when they searched the island. We can assume that the men had left the lighthouse on December 15th before nighttime. They had recorded work notes for the day on the slate. According to Moore, the fireplace didn't look like it had been used for days, so there must have been still light out when they left. The lamps had been cleaned and refilled, dinner was done, and the kitchen was tidy, all of which indicate that work was done and they were preparing for the coming night. We can also assume that it was Duckett and Marshall who first left the lighthouse, leaving MacArthur to man it alone for the time being, as protocol requires. They wore weather protection gear, which shows that the weather must have been pretty bad. According to Moore, both men also wore their sea boots. These articles of clothing were only used when the men planned to go down to the landings. The question is, why would the 2 men head out to the West Landing during a violent storm? Apparently, Duckett had been previously fined 5 shillings as punishment because he failed to look after his equipment in bad weather. For a man with a large family to feed, this amount of money was huge. He couldn't afford another fine. With the weather so bad, it wouldn't be too far off to say that he would have made his way to the West Landing to ensure that all the equipment there had been properly secured. Marshall was an experienced lighthouse keeper, and he most likely would have insisted on helping Duckett. MacArthur wasn't as experienced, so he was the one left behind. But then why did MacArthur leave his post, going against the rules, and run out of the lighthouse without his oilskin? It's possible that he wondered why Duckett and Marshall hadn't returned yet, so he went out to look for them. But it's unlikely that he would have run out without his waterproof coat in that kind of weather. So it must have been an emergency that made him leave his post without thought or planning. Some theorize that MacArthur might have already seen signs of the large swell coming towards the West Landing. He was situated more than 200 feet above sea level, allowing him to have a clear view of the waters below. MacArthur immediately ran out, forsaking his oilskin to save time, to warn the two men to be careful. Unfortunately, all of them got caught in it, causing them to disappear without a trace. However plausible this explanation is, there is no guarantee that it is the truth. The real reason why Duckett, Marshall, and MacArthur disappeared remains a puzzling mystery to this day. Whether it was misadventure, supernatural, or by design, only they would know. Unfortunately, dead men tell no tales, so we'll stick with what we believe most likely happened. A misfortune caused by Mother Nature, closing the book on the Flannan Isles Mystery, at least for now. If you love our content and want to support the channel, feel free to check our web shop where you can find exclusive true crime merch brought to you by Bad Things.